Welcome back to Self-Invested, where we talk about how you can do better with money. In this video, I'm going to be talking about the first home scheme that will allow first-time buyers to buy new build homes for 30% below market value. This is an initiative that was initially announced by the government back in 2014 and was called the Starter Home Scheme. However, until recently, there hasn't been much information about the scheme. In this video, I'm going to be talking about what first homes are, how the scheme will work, regional price caps, eligibility requirements and restrictions, when the scheme will be available, and at the end I'll be giving my thoughts on the scheme. So first homes are going to be new build properties that are sold at 30% below market value. Other than being sold at a discounted rate, they're going to be exactly the same as other new builds. So they're going to be sold to people who live in a community or work in a community where they're not able to afford to buy a property at market value. The scheme is going to be prioritized for first-time buyers and serving members of the armed forces and recent veterans. It's also going to be prioritized for key workers such as police, nurses and teachers. Properties under the first home scheme must be marketed and sold at least 30% below market value. According to the government, this is going to save buyers around £100,000 on average. Local authorities, however, will be able to set larger discounts of either 40% or 50% if they need to, based on the house prices in their area. So buyers purchasing first homes will purchase properties in the normal way. It'll be no different to purchasing a normal house. They'll also have access to conventional mortgages, and the government's going to be working with mortgage lenders behind the scene to encourage lenders to actually provide mortgages for this scheme. And I think they're going to be doing this by saying to mortgage lenders that if the buyer or the borrower is unable to repay their mortgage, the mortgage lender will have the ability to repossess that property and sell the property at market value in order to recoup any money that the borrower defaulted on. The last aspect about how the scheme is going to work is that when first homes are resold, so once somebody's bought a first home with the 30% discount and they decide to sell, the discount that they received when they initially bought their property will be applied to the price of the property when it's sold to the next person. Say for instance, somebody bought a first home which had a market value of £400,000, and so they got a 30% discount, which meant they only had to pay £280,000. If the value of that property increased to £500,000, that same discount the first buyer received, the 30%, will be applied to that new valuation, and so the person that buys the property from the initial buyer of the first home would be able to buy that property for £350,000. This means that the discount benefit is going to be passed on in perpetuity or forever. The way the government plan to ensure that this discount is passed on in perpetuity into the future is by applying a covenant against the title. So the title, the deeds of the property will state that the property must be sold at a certain discount below market value. In terms of price caps, regional price caps, there are going to be two regional price caps, one for inside London and one for outside London. The price cap for properties with the discount applied outside of London is going to be £250,000. This would be equal to a market value of £357,000. The price cap with the discount applied inside of London will be £420,000. This is equal to a market value of £600,000. Local authorities will have the ability to set lower price caps if they need to in their local area to make the scheme more accessible to the local community. So one of the restrictions with this scheme is that if you're applying for a property, you will need to have a local connection. This means that you would either need to live in the area, work in the area, or have grown up in that area. Local authorities will be able to set specific local connection restrictions provided they're able to demonstrate the need for that restriction in their area. Local connection restrictions, however, will be waived for members of the armed forces and recent veterans. It could also be waived for key workers such as police, nurses, and teachers, but this is yet to be confirmed. After 3 months, however, this local connection requirement will fall away. So after 3 months, if a property hasn't sold to somebody with a local connection, then it will be open to all first-time buyers to be able to buy that property with the same discount. So there's also going to be income caps and other eligibility requirements. The most a household income can be for a property outside of London is £80,000, and the most a household income can be for a property inside of London is £90,000. So if you're buying with a partner, this means that your combined salaries needs to be 80,000 or below if you're buying a property outside of London, and 90,000 or below if you're buying a property inside of London. If there are areas where the scheme is oversubscribed, then the local authority will be able to look at people's incomes to use that as a determining factor as to whether a person is able to benefit from the first home scheme. The scheme's only going to be available to first-time buyers, although the scheme may allow exceptions in very limited situations for people that have previously owned a property. I'm guessing that's going to be people who previously owned a property, have a local connection to an area, but are no longer able to buy a property of their own without any help. Now, the last restriction when it comes to purchasing a first home is that you won't be able to purchase a first home without a mortgage or some sort of finance for at least 50% of that property. So if you could buy 50% or more of a first home without a mortgage or any other type of finance, then you won't be eligible for the scheme. Like many of these schemes, there are restrictions around being able to rent out your property. Now, you should be able to have a lodger if you're living at that property, so just renting out a room to somebody else, but you will only be able to rent your property out without you living there in exceptional circumstances. The government have actually said that in exceptional situations or for unexpected life events, homeowners under the first home scheme will be able to rent out their home for up to 2 years. They've given 6 examples of when somebody will be able to rent out their property. The first is if you get a short job posting elsewhere, so outside of your area. The second is if you're deployed elsewhere, so I guess this is if you're a member of the armed forces. The third is if you have a relationship breakdown. The fourth is if you're fleeing domestic violence. The fifth is in the case of redundancy, so if you lose your job. And the sixth is if you're caring for a relative or a friend. So I guess if you have a relative or a friend that's terminally ill or very unwell, that's a situation where you would be able to rent out your property and go and care for that person. Well, according to the government, they plan to launch a pilot of 1,500 first homes as part of the Affordable Homes Programme, which is the same programme which is funding the new shared ownership model. They haven't said exactly when these homes will be available, but based on the fact it's being funded by the new Affordable Homes Programme, I think the earliest we're likely to see any first homes is going to be 2022. The government have said, however, that the majority of first homes will be built by 2025 to 2026, and that all of the homes under the scheme will be built by 2028 to 2029. If you want to buy a property in the near future, it's unlikely that you'll be able to take advantage of the scheme. 1,500 or 1,500 homes sounds like a lot of homes, but if you consider that in the context of England, it's not a lot of homes. A very limited amount of people are going to be able to take advantage of that pilot scheme, and the majority of people are going to have to wait until 2025 or 2026 to be able to find or to be able to realistically buy a first home. I think this is a great scheme. I like the fact that they are given a lot of control to local authorities so that they can adjust or shape the scheme to work as best they think for their local area. Councils are going to know what's affordable and what works for their local communities, and by giving local authorities control over, you know, what the discount is, being able to set higher discount amounts of up to 50% so that it's accessible to the local community is a very good thing. I also really like the fact that the discount which is given to the first buyer of the first home is passed on to subsequent buyers, and that's something that's missing in the right to buy scheme, where council tenants are able to buy their homes for below market value, but then when they come to sell that property, that discount isn't applied for the person that buys that property, even though it was initially a council home. But what do you think about the scheme? Is it something you're interested in? Are there any disadvantages or cons of the scheme that I haven't thought about or I haven't discussed? Yeah, please let me know down in the description. And if you like the video, please give the video a like. And if you haven't subscribed to the channel already, make sure you subscribe to the channel. And until the next one, take care.